Welcome to another edition of This Ain't No Game. I'm your host, Ryan Davis, and this week's joyless cinematic adventure is Lara Croft Tomb Raider, The Cradle of Life. Once again, reprising the role of Lady Croft are Angelina Jolie and Angelina Jolie's fakey English accent.
Something wrong?
She's joined by future Spartan Gerard Butler and everyone's favorite African safari guide, Djimon Hounsou. Now, like the first Tomb Raider movie, Cradle of Life follows Lara Croft as she races against an evil tomb raiding nemesis, this time a bioweapons manufacturer who establishes himself as way more of a Bond villain than his predecessor in this early scene where he poisons a treacherous associate during a clandestine meeting aboard his private jet.
Deploy my weapon, and your enemies, however great, will collapse from within. Rather like Mr. Monza's collapsing right now.
Both Lara and this Blofeld stand-in are after Pandora's box. They both believe that it contains some sort of super disease. This guy, Rice, he wants to sell it, and Laura wants to stop Rice. She enlists the help of Terry Sullivan, played by Gerard Butler, a mercenary with whom she has a conflicted romantic history, and the two go after a group of Chinese thieves who stole this crazy, diorama projecting orb that somehow leads to the titular Cradle of Life, which is where Pandora's box is held. Now, the first Tomb Raider was plenty silly and ridiculous, with its training robots and dated techno music and edgy post-feminist posturing and the bad Matrix outfits. You don't get any of that in Cradle of Life. But there's a lot more of Lara hopping around defying the laws of physics like the video game character that she is. And she's a little more cold-blooded with the icing of dudes. She's also got a little more of an extreme sports edge this time, doing like needless flips on her jet ski and riding her motorcycle on the Great Wall of China, and base jumping off of skyscrapers and other nonsense like that. Oh, she also punches a goddamn shark in the face, which is about as close to like the wildlife murdering ways of her video game counterpart as she really ever gets in these movies. The odd thing about Cradle of Life is that other than like the suspiciously well-preserved underwater temple at the beginning, there's just not a lot of tomb raiding going on here. The hunt spans several continents with major stops in Africa and a soundstage version of Shanghai, but it's usually spent chasing after the bad guys through city streets, malls, and laboratories, and Lara's constantly fidgeting with these like silly high-tech gadgets.
Hello, boys.
Now, as everyone approaches the Cradle of Life, the chase kind of devolves into the same supernatural nonsense as the first Tomb Raider. Everyone gets attacked by these bad CG effects, and the actual Cradle of Life is apparently this crazy cave with lots of flashing lights and gravity that's dictated by MC Escher, I guess. It's certainly ridiculous, as you can see, but it's not quite the same like giddy fever dream as the whole time pyramid climax of the first film, so that's a little bit of a bummer. You know, it's dumb, but it's not transcendently dumb. I had heard going into Cradle of Life that this was way, way worse than the original, but I gotta say it's kind of a wash. The production doesn't seem quite as ambitious, but still kind of feels like a poor man's Indiana Jones mixed with a poorer man's James Bond. I suppose Cradle of Life is still true enough to the source material, but again, the underlying problem is that Lara Croft is too much of a composite of other, more interesting characters. She just doesn't bring enough to the table on her own. That I think fans will appreciate. There are all those little references to BFG. There's a character named Pinky.
就是我们，走吧，欢迎回家。
叫什么？我能不能体验你们的贴身体？这很重要。好。Cheers.
And that's going to do it for this week's edition of This Ain't No Game. Until next week, remember that this guy still knows something that you don't. She just doesn't, bring enough to the table on her own. She just doesn't bring enough to the table on her own. She just doesn't bring enough to the table on her own. On her own? She just doesn't bring enough to the table on her own.
That's the one.
On her own?
Nope.
She just doesn't bring enough to the table on her own. on her own. And she just doesn't bring it up to the table on her own.
That was the one.